Hi, and thanks for tuning in. I wanted to remind you of our Road to 1,000 subscribers giveaway that we have going on our YouTube channel. If you subscribe and have a public profile, you'll be entered to win a free RX Smart Gear original jump rope. You'll get to pick the pattern of the handles, the color and weight of the cable, and you'll be getting one of the best-selling, best-performing jump ropes out there. Every time we hit a new century mark with the number of subscribers to our channel, we'll randomly select a new winner. And our friend Dave Newman is going to throw in a little something extra for each winner. So a special thanks to our sponsor, RX Smart Gear, to Dave Newman for being such a great partner, and to you for being a loyal listener. Good luck, and I hope you are our next winner.
Hey everyone, I got a secret to tell you. There's this really cool company out there called Element 26. We have partnered with them, and they have some of the coolest equipment on the market for us CrossFitters, lifters, strongmen. So one of the products they have is thumb tape. It is like the best thumb tape on the market. It is flexible and it moves with you, and it is very tacky and sticky. So great thumb tape. Another one of the products that I use and I love are their grips. They are chalkless grips. They are rubberized, and I'm a Clydesdale, right? I'm big. This helps me stick to the bar. I don't move. I can hang for a very long time as a big man with these on my hands. Great for farmer's carries. Even my hands are big enough. I can even use these on a barbell if I want to deadlift. Just saying. No chalk, super sticky. Gotta love them. Their website is element26.co. That is element26.co. Go check them out. So many cool products. We're going to keep showing you what they have over the next few weeks, but you have got to check this place out because they are constantly innovating, and see what they have to offer. Little hint, check out the belts. They got a really cool concept with the belts. You know that Velcro that always pops? They have a solution. So go check that out, element26.co. element26.co. Trust me, you'll have fun with this.
Hey.
How you guys doing?
Good, how are you?
How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it.
No problem.
We did a recording right after the games. We had the fortunate pleasure of attending the games in person, all four of us. And we did a quick little 20-minute sort of wrap up where we talked about like top 3 things we thought were awesome, and then maybe a couple things that we thought were opportunities for the games going forward. You weren't available for that conversation, but we'd love to sort of bring you into that conversation to sort of get your perspective on, you know, things that you thought were really great, just at a high level, and then things maybe that you hope to improve upon. And we're happy to share some of the things we talked about, since you probably didn't see that episode, but.
Yeah, let's hear yours, and then
Okay.
I'll riff off of that.
Cool. So our top 3 in no particular order, we talked about the overall pageantry and experience, right, for the fans. We, you know, you guys always do a great job of sort of the look and feel. It felt like an international competition. It felt like a world-class competition. And we thought the experience overall was great. Number 2 is the programming. And, you know, we probably have given you a lot of shit in the past on our podcast for programming. When it comes to, you know, things like wall walks and whatever else, you know how that goes. But we really liked the program. We thought it was balanced. It didn't feel like maybe in some years past where athletes were completely wrecked after the weekend, even though there were 15 tests. Like, it felt like a fair contest, and certainly that the fittest came out as a result of that. The third thing that we talked about was the season sequence, how you got to the season, you know, and how things had changed from the open to the semifinals. We thought that was a really good path in terms of, you know, the environment with COVID and everything else, and how that all worked out. And it had sort of a regionals feel, but not. So those are our top 3.
On the season format, it's interesting. That also for me is a big highlight, because it was such a departure from anything else we've ever done. It's very similar to things we've done, but not at all in terms of, you know, the 3-week open was a huge change. And then going from a 3-week open and then qualifying people to semifinals, or let's call it a semifinal or regional-like stage. The 3-week open wasn't, for myself and for others, as we discussed, going to be appropriate to get people to physical events. And that's where we decided to add another layer for the top competitors, the quarterfinals. And interestingly, I think that was a huge success. Like I really liked the quarterfinals. It gave everyone who's really serious about competing an opportunity to compete, and with more let's say stiff tests. The open tests are stiff through intensity and through going hard, but the loading on the quarterfinals can be a little different. And also the 3-week piece helped the open with affiliates because now they didn't have to facilitate 5 weeks of open events for their affiliate members. So I feel like the 3-week version was a much better expression. And that's, I think we've said this already. We've said this in other places, but that's definitely here to stay. So 3-week open, quarterfinals, into semifinals, and then into the games. As you mentioned with the COVID challenges, another cool thing about the semifinals was there was a lot of pressure at different stages. So we created that plan, the semifinals, and it had a lot of flexibility to it. What I meant by that is we were going to plan 10 in-person events, and as areas or regions of the world shut down or whatnot, that event would just move online. And that plan was made early on. Like this has a lot of flexibility in it. But what was happening was there was a lot of chatter from outside groups, from inside groups early on before they even happen. You guys should just cancel them all and take them online and take that whole stage online. But that was not like the intent, or that was not the way to express that, because built into that model, it had the flexibility to flex online due to local mandates or local outbreaks or local restrictions. Yeah, exactly. And so it basically worked out almost exactly as I thought it would, meaning half of them went online and half of them happened in person. I think it was half. So all the North American ones happened, right? So that was 4. And then, or no, Canada did not happen. So that's 3. And then one in Australia happened, and that's 4. And then one in South Africa happened. So yeah, 5. So five went online and 5 happened in person. And so the resiliency in the semifinals that we planned into it to deal with COVID or the restrictions, I think was a huge success. So to the season and the flow of it and how we got people to the games, yeah, I'm really happy with that. And also the last chance qualifier. So if you didn't get there, like you had plenty of opportunities, and it was fair, especially with the last chance qualifier, where we gave basically the people who were 1 spot and 2 spots out of a qualifying spot the ability to qualify again. On the programming, yes, go ahead.
Just a quick question about that. So you talked about half and half. So half of them were independently run semifinal events. Half were programmed by you, CrossFit HQ. So it gives you 2 different data sets as to the consistent programming versus the independent programming. Have you looked into that to see like how both of them have kind of turned out?
No, I didn't. We didn't, like, that's a good question, but we didn't dive into the programming, like how the 5 of our programming, how that base of people looks versus the other 5. Because also, like, I don't want to say anybody, like, their programming was appropriate and we looked through it. Some of them, there's a lot of criticism of some semifinal events, or some were too short, or there's some artistic things I could point out about some, but I'm not going to dive into them in terms of as tests, because I felt like they all did a good job of getting the right people there. There's none of them that I think, and I don't think anyone, maybe there are people, but I haven't paid attention, are saying, hey, this semifinal got the wrong people to the games. Because fundamentally, at this stage, and especially at that level, those guys, and I say this a lot about Matt and Rich and Tia, regardless of what programming comes out, the best are going to excel and be at the top anyways. I think, so what my point there is, the semifinals, programmed by us or not programmed by us, they all did what they needed to do and got the right people there, I believe. So let's see. Tia was at an in-person, Brooke was at an in-person, people like the Canadians, Brent and So Brent was not at an in-person. And you look at, okay, let's take Medeiros. Medeiros was at an in-person and he took second or third there and he won the games. Brent and Vellner were at an online and they took second and third at the games. So yeah, it's interesting. It would be interesting to put those two, but I don't think I personally wouldn't put much like there's anything to that in my eyes. Like I think both tests, the online and the in-person, did their job it needed to do to get the right people there.
Okay.
Unless, do you disagree?
No, we've heard a lot of complaints about from even athletes that they like the regionals having a consistent programming across all the events. And so you had that with the online, and then every semifinal had their own kind of style and substance to it. And so I just was wondering if you as HQ were looking at that going forward in the future.
Well, that's I mean, we've heard that same feedback from athletes too. I don't think we're going to come in and dictate the programming for all the semifinals. I think it is a good expression to let some of them do their own thing, or to let them do their own thing in general in terms of programming. But we're going to continue to give guidance. We gave some guidance. We'll probably give more guidance, and maybe we'll even standardize 1 or 2 events.
That would be cool. Yeah. And I mean, presumably
so
it's
going to be somewhere in the middle, not necessarily.
Sorry, you're delayed a little bit, Dave. I was just going to say, presumably some of those would be in person too next year. Like we don't have to split 5 and 5 anymore. We can get all of these done, fingers crossed, at the live venue.
Yeah, I hope, like you said, fingers crossed, all these events will happen in person, but we'll see, right?
Yeah, I mean, we thought after 2020, there's no way, we're going to be in the same situation a year later, and here we are. So you never know. So programming, you were going to talk about a little bit about a highlight of programming.
Yeah, so the programming of the games this year, I was really happy with it too. I feel like it was one of the best tests we've ever done all around, and I don't think there were some events where I was unhappy with how it played out, but overall, I think we did a really good job putting on a complete test of fitness that was had a lot of variety and had it was very fair. And like you said, it didn't destroy the athletes at the end of the weekend. And that's usually not like, I'm never like, hey, let's program this to destroy the athletes. Sometimes, like when you look at day 1 of the games last year, that was a pretty big day and that game that year was only 3 days. So it was much different than this year's, which was 4 days spread out over 5. I think it's like, I feel like in terms of programming, I found a stride, and it's like, it culminated with this year, and it'll continue to grow. But like from previous years, like in terms of, and I'm like thinking back to where I do all this, like the method and the way and the system and how, and what I do to analyze and what I do to look at in creating and how much time I put into all of it. Like it feels like it's all come together more so than any other year. Not to say that those other years were bad, but I think even internally, the thing that everyone else doesn't see, like the process to get to this point over the last 3 or 4 years was really being refined and modeled, and I was figuring out what I need, what inputs I need, and what I need to see and how I need to see it. Over the last 4 or 5 years, I was figuring that out. And now it's like, I feel like the system I use internally and the people I lean on and the process to get to where we have those events is like, it's at like 90%, meaning it can get better, but it's really close to being what works best for me for the process of creating those events.
Yeah. And
the
I feel
events,
like,
I think we're really, go ahead.
I was going to say, as athletes and as spectators, I think we really also felt that. Like we've been on this ride and as fans for a while, and many of us have been competing in the open, and definitely felt like there was this groove, or like, okay, we've got something really figured out here. It was pretty evident to us.
Yeah. Do you think
Yeah.
you sitting down and writing the book helped to sort of put that into a framework because you were forced to do so, documenting it?
Yeah, the book, and that's why I say 4 or 5 years, because 4 or 5 years, the book falls right into that period. There were two really monumental things, I think, when I think back in terms of programming that really, sorry about that, that really set me up for success. There was a period when I lived in Carlsbad for so from 2007 to 2010, I was living in San Diego, near San Diego State. It's while I was still in the Navy. And so those games I was programming from my house in San Diego, and actually the 2009 games, what a lot of people don't know is, or is it 2010, 7, 8, 9, the 9 games. No, hold on. The 9 games. I was programming from, no, the 10 games. No, the 9 games, 9 games. I was programming from Afghanistan. I was on deployment in Afghanistan and doing a lot of the programming from I did a little trip overseas. And so I was working on that while deployed. Then I moved to Carlsbad, which is North County, California, or North County, San Diego. So it's about 45 minutes up the coast from San Diego. And from 2010 to 2008, I lived in Carlsbad. And there at my house, like I'm at my house right now, and I have a whiteboard. And actually, this is a whiteboard I had at that house. And so for about 2010 to about 2005 or 6, I would program in my office, my home office, like this. And then one year I decided, and I'd have people test workouts, and they'd come to my house and test workouts. And I decided, hey, I need a separate creative space. I need a separate facility, a separate office that is just all programming. And so while I was living in Carlsbad, CrossFit leased out a 3,000 square foot warehouse about a couple miles away from my house. It was like 3 or 4 minute drive away. And that was the Yarrow facility. And that like really helped me I needed a space separate from my home and from my daily CrossFit work to go do the creative part of programming the CrossFit Games. And so I'd have that facility, which you've probably seen in some of the old video, not old, but some of the recent videos. And it's dedicated solely to programming. And so I had a room set up with whiteboards all over it. I had a gym set up with testing areas, and having the separation of creative for me was a monumental moment. Like, okay, I need a place and a time where I go to do this. So that was huge for me in all of this process. The second one was the book. And the book, because every time I started programming that year, I started writing. And oftentimes while writing, it made me think of things, and it made me realize like what I'm doing or the systems I'm using, they're working or not. So yeah, the book was really good in helping me in this process. The book was a lot of work. It was a lot because like just every time I thought about it, every time I had ideas, I tried just jotting it down. The truth is, it was more of a journal than a book. And it was a book, but it was very intentionally a journal style book. Earlier in that year, I read a lot, and I had read a Lil Wayne book, The Rapper. He wrote a book from Rikers Island while he was in prison, and it was a journal. Actually, I probably have it right there. So I have an area where I track every book I read in order, and for the last 5 years, I have every book, and I write in when I start reading the book and when I finish, and the average pages per day that I read for each book. So my books are all ordered in chronological order by completion. Hold on, I'll show you. So it's in there somewhere. Okay, hold on. Oops, photo didn't take. And so his book, so that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, cool.
That's just my bookshelf with all the books I've read over the past few years in order. His book was that. His book was a journal, and he had entries, throughout his stay there. And I read that and I was like, oh, I can do this. This isn't too hard. Like what he did, this style he used, I should try this for for a CrossFit Games book, for a book about programming. So I decided to start doing that. The other thing that was really motivating to me was I read shortly after that, I read a Tiger Woods book. I forgot what that one was called, but it was his most recent book about winning the Masters or about competing in the Masters. And I ended up Googling like how many words was the Tiger Woods book. And it was like 60,000 or 50,000 words or something. And I was like, all right, that's my goal. I'm going to write a book that's 50,000 words. And I was on the app I was using, not the app, but the app, the Apple. I was using, I guess it's called, what is it called? I forget what it's called, but it tells you how many words you've written. And so I was tracking that. I was like, okay, I hit 10,000, I hit 20, and then I hit 50. And I was like, all right, so this is easy. I'm going to surpass his book. And then I think I ended up with 120,000 was the final word count for the book. So Tiger Woods, his book set, like kind of put me on a goal to try to beat. Since then, I've thought about writing others, but I just haven't committed to it. I just haven't like sat down this year. Actually, as soon as this game's ended, I thought about starting it then for this year, but I didn't do it. Now I'm kind of intimidated by it. I probably should do it just because of that, but I have to. I have to process and also I don't know if I want to do the same style again. Like I don't know. Like I did that once. I'm the type of person like let me try something else. I don't want to recreate. I have thought about writing a book about the history of the CrossFit Games. So from 07 to now. But that's also daunting too, because that's just a monumental task in like going back and reviewing and making it interesting. So yeah, so there's that.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so you want to hear what we thought could be improved at the games? It's not really that much,
Yeah.
actually. So our biggest beef was really more around the venue and the concessions. So, you know, it took us 45 minutes to get something to eat in the Coliseum, and it caused us to miss part of the competition. It's very annoying. Didn't want to have to wait in those lines. And sort of for people that only had like a festival pass and wanted to watch it outside the Fit Aid tent, a lot of the stuff in the outdoor venue like shut down once North Park shut down. So there wasn't really a lot of options for those folks as well to sort of be able to stay and sustain themselves, because you know we have to eat constantly. That was really, I think that, and I had said like exiting the Coliseum was kind of a pain in the butt too. Like I wish they just opened all the doors and let everyone leave, because we all had to kind of bottleneck into like one little entrance and it was kind of annoying. But you know, if that's the worst of our experience, I think, you know, we're doing pretty good. The third thing we talked about was water quality. So the athletes that kind of got bubble gut from the water, presumably, don't know. I mean, I'm sure you've heard about it and have considered it. My joke is, you know, you have to have a bacteria-resistant GI tract in order to win the CrossFit Games. That's just part of the contest anymore. But you know, thoughts on
I
those?
think, let me I'm going to interrupt you on that one. It's interesting because so the county and the local authorities are very on top of the water, and like a week before the games, they're like, hey, you can't do this. A couple of days later, they're like, hey, the water is completely fine. It's all about the algae. And it really, like, that's what's cool about this. We're not, hold on. Sorry about that. We're not the ones signing off on the water. The local authorities in the county are, and they deal with this stuff on a regular basis because of people swimming, all the triathlons. And so to a certain point, like, I'll tell you what, the water's not, when we're putting athletes in the water, it's completely okay. We're not putting anyone in there whenever it's not. There are issues of people, you know, potentially ingesting too much stuff and, you know, potentially like compromising their system because of, I don't want to say swimming improperly or just not having enough experience there.
Close their mouth.
But like if you drink,
Close your mouth.
yeah, well, if you do ingest a lot of that water, yeah, you're probably going to have some issues regardless of how what state it's in. And so I really know, and I want to say that like, hey, we're not like, yeah, the water's fucking not really good, but put them in anyways. because
Sure,
it's
sure.
never like we're in daily contact with them, and they're very clear with, hey, the water is very a-okay. And now that being said, you know, fuck, I mean, I'll even talk about Bridges. I think it was the year Josh Bridges, everyone talked about the year he had shits.
Yeah.
I mean, how
19.
many other athletes had, yeah, how many other athletes had it that year? I don't know. I don't know. I didn't hear about anyone. And my point there is like, one is not an indication of a problem. One of 80 is not an issue. One of 80 might be, it's definitely an outlier. Now, here's where I think we have an argument where like 40 of 80 or 45 or 50 of 80 have this issue. But like, I'm just not even seeing that. And that, I don't know, because I don't pay attention to social media that much. And I didn't get any input from anyone. But did any of the individual athletes this year have any of those issues?
Yeah, I mean, we interviewed probably, I would say maybe half a dozen that we interviewed had issues. You know, and to the point where they were pretty sick. But I mean, I agree with what you're saying. Obviously, the water was deemed safe by the government and, you know, and the local officials, and it's not like you're putting people, you know, knowingly in danger. But clearly, some people's GI tracts do not, you know, do not agree with some of the flora that's happening in that water, and it almost like becomes another piece of the competition. You know, I don't know how you train for that, but it's just interesting to note. And you know, I just wondered if, you know, you've got one more year there, would you consider like an indoor water event as opposed to an outdoor water event next time? Or
Yeah,
had that even
absolutely,
been
but not for
considered?
that reason.
But not for that. Yeah, sure.
Yes, so indoor water events are considered, but not to avoid what you guys are talking about.
Fair enough.
So if we ever do take it indoors, it's not because we are sensitive to the GI tracts of athletes.
And even the 6 we talked to were varying degrees of illness, and it's 6 out of 80 is still not a huge number.
Right. Yeah,
Also, it feels a little bit silly to be talking to a Navy SEAL about the quality of this water maybe not being the best. Like, we'll shut up now.
Yeah.
There's also that aspect of it too, that I think, yes. Like in my mind, I'm like, just where I came from, it's just like, whatever, suck it up, you know?
Right.
But I get it. It's
It
different
says
now.
here, it says here right in my notes, Dave, is having a bacteria resistant GI tract just a requirement to be the fittest in the world, or are people being whiny? So
Yeah.
we recognize that sometimes.
I will say this. I do not think that has ever prevented anyone who was going to be the fittest in the world from being the fittest in the world, or prevented someone who had the potential to be the fittest in the world from being the fittest in the world. And again, even those people, you use the word sick. And I don't know if, Scott, I don't know if that's the right word to use, because sick implies some severity to, like, I think they might have had an irritation, or I think, because here's what I'll say. None of those athletes, to a large degree, came to our medical team and said, hey, I have an issue, I'm having trouble competing. And then our medical team brought it to us and said, hey, because that process does happen for a lot of things. Like the athlete will tweak something, they'll bring it to the medical team will flag it to us. That never is flagged to us. So if they're feeling a little off or they have some issues, it's never major enough to affect their performance. Or let me say that to significantly set them back for the weekend. And if it was something that was causing them to be set back for the weekend, we would hear about it. And we don't, meaning they would talk to medical would tell us, and we would know, okay, this person got sick from the water.
Right. That's fair. So any other bottom issues, maybe things you would love to improve upon for your last year in Wisconsin that you want to talk about?
Yeah, there's a lot, obviously, like there's a lot of stuff that I look to make better. There's some stuff, most of it I don't want to talk about just because it's still processing and figuring out, but increasing the fan experience and the athlete experience at the same time, making those two better, keeping the spectacle exciting, keeping the test comprehensive and complete for finding the fittest alive, not being stale, not stagnating, continuing to grow, continuing to explore, continuing to make. Now, this is never the goal, but it happens but continuing to wow the athletes and the fans. Like, I mean, just like with even simple things like the handstand push-up standard and stuff like that, continuing to evolve the sport, continuing to push it forward are the type of things that like I'm thinking to make it better. There's some stuff at Madison that, yeah, for sure are, new, so there's some new ideas and new things that I would like to do there and try that we have not, that are still, it's still keeping me excited for Madison.
Awesome.
So I have one quick question before we leave this subject, and that is, you talked on the CrossFit Games podcast about that you have to think about the visual while programming just as much as the test itself. And so when you do that, do you think about that from a broadcast standpoint and a live experience, or can you just control the live experience?
Well, both, but I think one plays into the other. Meaning, like, if you can build it for the live experience, the storyline, the broadcast can make that also appropriate for them. Like, meaning they kind of they're in alignment. And I used to, when we were at Madison, I'm sorry, not Madison, Carson, really all this stuff with like the visuals started playing out early, probably 2010, 2011, early in the games. I saw the necessity and the priority of making it a good visual. And at some point, I had this idea where I thought a fan, for most, this isn't true for all of them, but for a lot of our events, a fan should be able to get up, walk away, get a hot dog, come back, sit down, and be able to tell who's winning. And like, if I was able to build something or an event like that, I'm doing the right thing because the visual is appropriate and it's showing the race. Another analogy I've played with in my head is it's like a slow motion horse race. And so like, you know, with people and not horses. So they're all lined up and they're just slowly making their way. Sometimes it's not slow motion, sometimes it's really fast, but they're just making their way down the field, and the progress is showing who's winning. So those things, like we're talking about the last 4 or 5 years of the programming going through a phase of just like really refinement. That's for the systems and for the method of making them. That's not for the visual. I feel like the visual aspect, that was really, priority was put on that 8, 9, 10 years ago. But we're always finding ways to make it better and improve on that and do other little things.
When you're doing the some of the programs, do you take in consideration some of the athletes that are in the field, not necessarily in a negatively way, like trying to keep them down, but like, you know, for example, that the yoke event that Tia almost finished in the first round, obviously we didn't want that to happen, but you consider that when you're looking at it and saying, okay, I know this person's going to do well, maybe I'll bump this up a little bit harder. You know,
no, I don't consider, usually not individuals. Usually not. I don't consider individuals. And on some of those, like when you look at that yoke thing, like, yeah, that was not the intent for someone like Tia. She finished in 2 rounds. I think about 10 men and maybe 8 or 9 women finished in 2 rounds. Then there was a big chunk that finished it in 3, and then I think a majority, maybe a couple that took the 4. There's a fine line on that one because you could have gone too heavy on the yoke where it just like was unfair to a lot of people. You could have gone much lighter. I thought that weight prior to Tia and some of the others doing it was appropriate. It wasn't the yoke though that was the issue on that event. The issue on that event in my creating it was actually the work in the beginning. Really, I should have had 1 or 2 extra med balls over it, or five more GHGs. I needed that to take about 140, where it took them about 120. If that would have taken a little more time, 10 more seconds, maybe even 15, she wouldn't have been able to get it as far, and then it would have compounded, and then it would have been appropriate. But no, I really don't think of individuals. Sometimes after the tests are done, you'll start playing the game of talking about like, and usually that's only when there's a lot of people around, like on our team. Oh, so-and-so is going to do great at this. So-and-so is going to do great at this. but sometimes there's workouts that are created where you think like only, so there's, let's say there's a field of 40. There's 3 ways with time caps I think of a workout. Okay, I want everybody to finish. That's some of them, a good number of them. Okay, I want this time cap where only about half finish. That's less rare. And then sometimes we create time caps where only like 4 or 5 are going to finish. Like for example, the handstand. Although I thought more would finish that, only 2 finished that. The time caps are all arbitrary. Like all these athletes obviously are capable of finishing almost everything we give them, but in the time cap, which is an arbitrary number that we put on it for a variety of reasons, I do think about that a lot. Like, what's my intent with this event and the time cap? On that event, the one you just asked me about, I really wanted, I tried so hard to get it to be, I wanted everyone to go to the 4 rounds, but again, the first half was off. So, and those are the things that eat at me, and those are the things that like I try to improve on for next year. Like that's some of the stuff that I'm really focused on.
Mm-hmm. I noticed, Dave, over the years too, the last event usually has some kind of dramatic march at the end. And I just wonder, is that deliberate? And if so, do you plan that last event first and then sort of build everything around that so that those movements are taken out of the equation? Because I love the drama of some of those, lunging movements or whatever it is we've seen moments like the Tia and Kara ending that are just like, your heart stops.
So
is that intentional?
Those are always like easy money, easy winners. Like, you're going to do something like that and it's going to be a fan favorite. That being said, they're not always. Because of that, there was a point where I said, all right, I'm fucking sick of ending with a lunge or ending with a long thing, and we're going to do something different. Like that's how I'm trying to actually pull up some of the other games. And so even if you look at last year with Atlanta, I mean, that was very different. And we made that a super long workout because we didn't have fans. And I really wanted to flip the script on how we did things. And so that's why that was that way. This way, I came back and wanted to do, so it's a good question you asked if I programmed from that and worked backwards. No, but I put that at the end and said, we're going to end with some type of lunge. I don't know what it's going to look like. And then as everything else starts falling into place, what movements were going to be there kind of did fall naturally. So this year I did decide which that we're going to end with the lunge. Last year we didn't have that. Hold on, I'm going to look 19. And then let's see, 19. Yeah, 19 ended with the standard, it looks like, which was the 30 cleans, 30 muscle ups, 30 snatches.
Right.
And then 18 might have been, is that the year that, let's see, 18 ended with the yoke carry. Okay, so that's that's a good one to end with though. But so yeah, it's not always that, but those are easy for that moment, and they're easy winners for the fans on site and for broadcast and for everyone to watch. But you're right, but you're also wrong because I try to deliberately go away from doing those.
I love it. So,
and on that note, at the let me just add this. I was really like at the semifinals that I went to, most of them ended with a lunge of some sort. And I was like, fuck, I don't know if I want to end anymore with the lunge because everyone else is doing it. But I still decided to stay on course because at that point I had that lunge idea already on the board. Like, we're going to end with some sort of lunge.
Yeah, I see them as just paying homage to you and your brilliance, because that's just, it is a really dramatic way to end. And I love it. So another piece that we talked about regarding the games were just sort of highlights from the weekend. And we have universal highlights like Annie, Thor's daughter, and that amazing snatch, and the dominance of Mal O'Brien. Chris, I was about to say Chris Spieler, Scott Panchik and his retirement announcement, beforehand, and him sort of soaking up the moment and all that. From your perspective, were there any sort of standout moments that you observed that maybe we as viewers missed or wouldn't necessarily have cared about, but because you've got such a unique perspective, Was there some kind of highlight or high moment that you thought like, wow, this is really fucking cool?
Well, this is not a really fucking cool, but I think I talked about this on our podcast too. When one of the most significant moments to me, like the Annie thing is such a highlight. And like, it's this amazing moment of the weekend and her, standing up and the story that goes with that. Moments after that, I walk into the tunnel and Tia runs in front of me and Tia just breaks down and starts bawling. And she was going to find Brooke and I was going to find Brooke. And like that moment of seeing Tia just complete, like not just crying, she was bawling. And like, I was like, oh, fuck. And it was just like, it was a powerful moment. And she ran to the back and I went to where Brooke was where she was, but all her family was there. She was in the x-ray room. I didn't go in. All her family was there. They were all in tears and everyone was in tears. And that was just like a significant and memorable moment for me from the games, because for me, oftentimes the moments that I remember the most aren't the athletes celebrating, but sometimes it's things like this where that was very defining of the weekend for me in a very different way because of how tragic it was.
So speaking of moments, moments you gave the crowd, I noticed that you would take a hat, have someone from the Heat sign it and throw it into the crowd. Where did that come from?
I've been doing that for a number of years. I think maybe 3 or 4. I think maybe in Madison I started that. It's just a cool.
You did that. You did that in Carson. I was in Carson in 16, and you were throwing your robe hats out at then too.
Yeah, so I'll sign it, and then I have an athlete sign it, so it's just not about me, and it's more about the athlete. And then I'll have the athletes throw it into the crowd. And like, there's very few people at that moment that can get an athlete to sign a hat and throw it into the crowd. And so I can do that. And so I leverage that. I ask them to sign it and, toss it into the crowd and give something back, get the fans engaged. It's just a cool little twist I like doing. In Carson too, I used to wear a lot of affiliate shirts, and affiliates would give me a lot of shirts. It's funny because I really kind of understand now what the difference is with Carson and Madison in that regard. In Carson, the way the venue was set up, like I would stand in the pits and there's fans like right behind me and everyone's like right behind me cascading up. And so people will just walk down and hand me shirts. In Madison, if you're right behind us or right behind me when I'm in the pit standing, you're like elevated and hard to see. So engaging and interacting with someone like me in the pits is way harder in Madison because of the way the venue is set up. But in Carson, it was super easy, and people would like every 5-10 minutes, people would run down and just hand me an affiliate shirt. And then so I went out of my way of trying to wear all of those shirts throughout the weekend at the games. That's not going on at Madison.
No,
So
for sure.
one thing I want to be clear. So I know sometimes you get a reputation of, Dave Castro is a prick, but what I wanted to share and make sure that people knew is, as I've volunteered at many events and I have witnessed you go and thank everybody and tell them how much you appreciate their volunteering for the event. So I just wanted to make sure to make that clear.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I also,
I don't mind.
You don't love that?
You don't mind being a prick?
Yeah.
No, I don't mind being a prick. I don't mind being a bad guy. I don't mind being criticized and all of those things. None of that I'm looking for or do deliberately. Like I'm just who I am. And sometimes, like, especially when I'm hyper focused or in work mode, I'm not gonna say I'm a prick, but I can be really hard on people and I push people and demand a lot out of people. And people on the outside sometimes see that and, maybe are critical of it. People also don't like some stylistic things of me, whatever. But I don't care about criticism too much. I ignore most of it. In terms of, I'm sure criticism on a petty level, but when there's legit criticism of the event or the professional aspect, yeah, I'll listen to that. Sorry, Amy, go on.
That's okay.
No.
I was going to say, I totally respect too that you are very private about your family life, and I totally wanted to support that. I'm just curious though, is there something like you like to do as a dad or as a family as a way to like unwind, where Dave Castro gets to, just be a family man, like go hiking or something like that?
I have two daughters. With one, it's we play chess almost on a nightly basis. And for a while, I would win. She's only 11, and now it's pretty much 50-50. She can beat me most of the time. Not most of the time, about half the time. So that's one of the things I like to do with my youngest. With my older, we watch in the evening. We have a show we watch. So we kind of bond around some of those things. But I travel a lot, so I try to spend as much time with them as I can. And yeah, you said it, but I'll say it again. Like keeping that aspect of my life private from early on in my involvement with CrossFit has been super important to me, because early on in my involvement with CrossFit, I saw people start to come at me and start to talk negatively about me and to start to attack me online. And so I was like, okay, I didn't even ask to be like, it's not like I started working for CrossFit and I'm like, I want to be famous in this community, or I want to be a big person in this community. That just kind of developed as all of CrossFit was growing and my role was growing and my role with Greg and the company was growing. So seeing how people were and how mean people could be, I was like, there's no fucking way I'm going to put my family forward and like even like submit them to kind of any of this. So keeping that separation for me has been huge priority, and my family really appreciates it now at this point too, and I'm really happy I do it. I said this in my book, I think, and I say this sometimes, but like I could go into a store right now and I could recognize, I know Jason Khalipa's kids and Rich Froning's kids and Sevon Matosian's kids. They could be walking down an alley without their parents, or an aisle. And I could say, oh, that's Avi. And I don't know if that's like I don't know if that's for my family. I don't want that to be the case. I don't want anyone to ever see my children, especially when I'm not around, and be able to say that's Dave's daughter. So that's the reason. And when they're grown up, and if they want that for themselves, that's on that. That's fine, you know.
Yeah,
Go
that's
ahead, Kat.
important. No, I was going to go back to when you said that you can get angry at people sometimes, you know, if you're in the middle of, you know, a world-class event and something goes wrong, or, you know, there's an issue. How angry were you at Herman during the signage issue at the games?
Oh,
Because I noticed, and I know Herman personally, so I feel like I can call him out a little bit, but I felt really bad for everybody in that alleyway down there after that, because you were running late and somebody messed up.
It wasn't him.
And
I wasn't mad at him.
oh yeah,
In the moment, I was mad. In the moment, I was mad at the whole thing, but I wasn't mad at him. And ultimately, that was on me. I was mad. And that evening we had a meeting we have a nightly war room meeting. And I went in there and I said, hey, everything that went wrong tonight was completely my fault. And it was completely my fault because I pressed us way too fucking hard. Like, I do this to people. I do this to myself, but I do this to people who work for me. Like, I push us really hard. And at those events, oftentimes I like to push people further than even they're recommending. Hey, this is too aggressive. And I like to see us step up oftentimes and overcome that. And this was one of those times where basically the schedule that I created, the timing that I created for that event was way too fucking aggressive. And some people told me, hey, this is too aggressive. And I said, no, we're going to do it anyways. It's going to work. And it didn't. So ultimately, like, where every system, Herman's team and some of the other teams, and every place that broke down, it wasn't their fault. It was entirely my fault. And so I was mad at the moment, but afterwards, like, I knew, like, I was trying to get it back on track, and the yelling or the directing wasn't like at them specifically, but it was like trying to get things moving. So I wasn't mad at him.
yeah, he's a good guy. So when you think about the level of irritation that at that moment, and compare it to how you felt during the ruck run in 19, with all those little sandbag piles back and forth. Because I happen to be a judge at 2019, and I got to see your displeasure of how that kind of panned out or played out. So compared, which one pisses you off more, right?
You got all the good ones.
I like to stir the pot sometimes.
I
a
think
little bit.
this one did more than the ruck one, because this one is like it really affected the timing and the schedule. And then the workout, actually, the time cap was too aggressive on that too. And so like there was a lot of things. This one was way worse than the ruck run. The ruck run was an issue, but for me, not as bad as this one. Now, all of these things, it is like, you know, I've thought about what happened there with that event, and even this will apply to the ruck. But again, like, we're really pushing the envelope and pushing the edge of what we're doing and how we're doing it. And so much of this stuff, very few people don't know about. And so even the judges, even the or the volunteers for the theatrics and for the test, we keep a lot of this stuff secret. And so when it comes down to on site, like, you're not able to have 4 or 5 days with a team rehearsing exactly how that is going to go down. So sometimes when we're operating on this edge of secrecy and edge of, okay, you're going to find out a few hours before, and you're going to have to get the system down for doing this. And the athletes got briefed on it an hour before, and they're going to have to remember, like, it really places a lot of stress on the system, and we learn from it and grow from it. And ultimately, in all of these cases, the test usually is not compromised, meaning everything that happened on the clean and the run, all this stuff we're talking about, didn't affect the rankings or the outcome of the test. And everything on the ruck, like, there was some confusion, but it didn't prevent anyone from winning that event, or someone didn't perform worse at that event because of some of that confusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point, right? It's, and all that tension causes more tension, right? It's almost palpable. So it's like a perfect storm. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about ambassadors for the sport. So we've got, like, you know, obviously Rich is a great ambassador for the sport. You got Matt, you've got these past champions, Tia, great ambassador. And the 4 of us were talking about it last night, and we were considering the fact that maybe you don't have to be a champion necessarily to be a great ambassador for the sport. And we had some examples, like Danielle Brandon, for example. She's on your CrossFit podcast, and she's a great ambassador, but she hasn't won the CrossFit Games. Like, who are some of those people that stand out for you? And my follow-up question would be, can Ricky Garrard be a good ambassador for CrossFit?
I think there's a lot of good ambassadors that aren't champions. And Noah Olson is a classic example. Noah Olson's a really good dude, and he's a good ambassador and someone who's never won the game. But also, a lot of people like Josh Bridges has never won the games. Chris Spieler never won the games. And they're good ambassadors for, and I'd argue that there's some that have won the games that aren't great ambassadors. Ricky Garrard, yeah, I think he could be a good ambassador. No, I do.
I do too.
It depends how this all plays out. And meaning, we're going to keep testing him. And we did test him through the last 6 months last year. And if he stays clean and keeps doing well, and here's what I really like and respect about Ricky. He, throughout all of this, he didn't say, fuck you, CrossFit, I'm going to go become a bodybuilder, and I'm going to become a power lifter, or I'm going to become a weightlifter. He kept CrossFitting, and he kept posting his scores, and he did the open, even though he couldn't do the open, and he posted his scores, and he stayed around and kept training and said, all right, I'm going to come back. And like, to me, I respect that. Sorry about that. And I really do wish him the best and hope he does well. And here's the thing but I will say this about ambassadors. Now, there's just I think it's also okay if some of these athletes don't want to be an ambassador. What I mean by that is, like, hey, I just want to compete and I want to excel. And like, if I don't really if I don't fit into the mold or want to fall into this place of trying to be a good ambassador for CrossFit, or what I'm saying here, let me rephrase this, said another way, I don't have that expectation of all these guys. Meaning, if you choose, if you just want to win, and then I'm not like, hey, now you got to be a good ambassador, and you have to really, every individual has their own drive and their own things and their own way of doing business and their own perspective on how they want their image. And I respect that. I wouldn't care if Ricky became a villain. I think having a villain, and I'm not saying he is, but I think having a villain is okay.
We've
I think
talked about that.
I think how Matt is. Look, the angle Matt showed on the Rogan podcast, that like a lot of us knew that that area was there, and he, you know, we knew he wasn't forward with it, but he kind of opened up on some of that. Like, good on him, whatever. Then he changed his tone once he started selling his programming, but that's different. I mean, now he's trying to be a businessman. So my point is, like, I don't care how any of the athletes, like, I don't expect them to, now that you're at the top of the sport, you need to be an ambassador. No, just be you and do what you want to do. If you want to be an ambassador, great. If you just want to do your thing, win, and just go off into the mountains and do your thing there by yourself, great too.
I think the villain thing is even more important than the ambassador. For CrossFit to grow, you have to have someone to root against. Just like in the NFL, like people hate the Cowboys or people hate the Patriots. Like you have to have that person or team to root against.
Yeah.
It should be hard.
Yes.
Yeah.
But here's
Okay.
the thing. I'll say this. Some people in our community struggle with the notion of there being a bad guy or a villain. Because our community is much different than the NFL. Our community is much different than the ball sports, because like all of us do CrossFit, and all of us, like not all of us, but a lot of us go to affiliates, and like we're more tight knit. So I think some people struggle with the idea of there being an asshole or a villain or a bad guy.
Yeah, and I can't imagine being at like the CrossFit Games and having Ricky Garard there and having people booing him. Like that, I don't think that would ever happen. You know, it's not like you're in Philly and they're throwing batteries at the pitcher in the bullpen, you know.
Yeah.
I would hope not. You know, I couldn't imagine that there'd be booing, you know, unless they're booing you, Dave, you know, or a judge or something like that. But no one's booing athletes at the games, and hopefully that's how that works out. Quick question about Masters. I know we're hitting up an hour here, so we won't take too much more of your time, but we're all Masters athletes. And, you know, there's all this talk about, it was awesome that the Masters got, you know, onto the field and into the Coliseum this year. They weren't in the horse barn or whatever we were calling that secondary location. But in essence, you know, you've got to run the CrossFit Games as a business, even as a sport. And, you know, there's probably going to come a time where you're going to have to make some tough decisions about, you know, numbers and things like that. And will there be something else for Masters and maybe age groups to do that's not in Madison, that's not the CrossFit Games, but that takes place of that? I know there's Masters competitions in the periphery, MFC, Masters Legends. You've got the Pit Fitness Ranch for teens. What are your thoughts on that? And just so you know, like I'm in favor of you separating them, actually. So
I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm not ready to share.
okay.
But I'll say this: you're asking the right questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And selfishly, I actually am part of the team at MFC to run that event. So I have an interest, obviously, in it moving too. I just think it's a great way to sort of celebrate those age groups and keep the cash flow coming in, but in a different way. So we'll see what happens.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. This was fun.
I appreciate it, Dave. Thank you so much. Best of luck with your podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll be tuning in to see what else is going on.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye, Dave.
Have
Thank
a good
you.
one.